Welcome back. Today we're looking at some really intense submitted material analyzing the fallout from Brett Cooper's defense of Nick Fuentes.
Yeah, it digs into political hypocrisy, Fuentes calling himself a Nazi, what cancellation even means. Lots to unpack.
Definitely. So let's dive straight into the structures.
Sounds good.
Because honestly, the writer's tackling huge themes here. That needs a solid framework.
I agree completely. They're aiming for this big critique, covering political consistency and spiritual integrity. But right now, the main political critique kind of falls apart structurally when it suddenly pivots from hypocrisy to a very personal theological point.
Oh yeah, you feel that shift. It's almost like whiplash. I get why they want to connect them, the idea that a spiritual failing underpins a political mistake.
Right. But the way it's done, it ends up feeling like two separate arguments fighting each other, not one smooth idea.
Exactly. You look at the Tinashe Peter segment mentioned, the political part, it's strong. It uses Fuentes' own words, Hitler Friday, Team Hitler, against Cooper's defense.
Mm-hmm.
And it points out Ted Cruz's flip-flopping on the Nazi label. That's a tight, effective political critique right there.
There really is. But then, boom, no real transition, and suddenly we're deep into Cooper's mother consulting mediums.
Yeah.
With scripture references like Leviticus and Corinthians popping up, we leap from, public square political arguments to interpreting ancient spiritual laws in, a paragraph?
It feels like reading a sharp legal analysis and then someone just staples in a chapter from a theology text. I mean, both parts might be well argued on their own.
But the connection is just assumed. It's not built.
And that assumption makes the whole structure feel wobbly.
Totally. So to really make this critique land, you've got to either separate the political and theological bits, or build a really clear bridge between them.
A conceptual bridge, yeah. Explain why the spiritual issue is directly relevant to the political one being discussed.
Exactly. Otherwise, you risk losing readers, right? Someone might agree 100% on the politics, but find the spiritual angle unconvincing or maybe even off-putting.
And then they might just dismiss the whole thing because the structure felt forced.
Precisely. We don't want that.
Okay, so what would that look like, practically? How can the writer fix this?
Well, there are a couple of clear options, I think. First, the simple way. Just split them. Present the political analysis, Fuentes, Cruz, Cooper, as one complete piece. Done.
Focused on political accountability.
Right. Then follow up maybe with a separate piece exploring the spiritual side, the foundational discernment angle, the mediums, all that.
Okay. But what if they feel strongly that these two must stay together, that the connection is the whole point?
Then you have to explicitly make that connection. Don't just imply it. Stop treating the spiritual part like a personal detour.
Frame it differently.
Frame it as the root cause analysis. You need a sentence, a transition that says, basically, this seeming lack of godly discernment, which we see in the comments about mediums, actually corrupts the ability to judge political reality. Something like that.
Maybe tie it to that Corinthians verse mentioned, 1 Corinthians 15:33, about bad company.
Yes, perfect. This spiritual blind spot stops someone from recognizing bad company politically. That makes the theological point serve the political one. It justifies its presence right there.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense structurally. So building on that, if we get the structure solid, the next hurdle is the language, because a harsh tone can wreck even the best structure.
Absolutely. That brings us to the second big point. Tone and style.
Right. The repeated use of, hyperbolic and dismissive names really distracts from the actual sharp arguments being made. It risks alienating readers who are there for the substance.
This one's a biggie. It's probably the fastest way the material shoots itself in the foot, credibility-wise.
I think so too. Both critiques mentioned use these really charged, repetitive personal attacks. Dingbat, cuckoo, queen of confusion, gropers.
Yeah.
And they just drown out the genuinely complex points, like the Storybox's distinction between criticism and cancellation. That's nuance.
Or Peter's comments on narcissism. These are smart observations, but they get buried under all the name-calling.
It makes it too easy for the people being criticized to just dismiss it all, doesn't it?
Totally. They don't have to engage with the logic. They can just say, oh, look, they're just calling names, they're hysterical, and sidestep the actual argument.
So the suggestion is to elevate the tone?
Definitely. Focus the critical language on the behavior, on the logical fallacies. Let the evidence do the heavy lifting. Let the analysis deliver the condemnation.
That's always more powerful in the long run than just throwing insults.
Way more powerful. It shows you're interested in a reasoned critique, not just, a shouting match.
So give us an example, like with Candace Owens, who gets called cuckoo. How would you rephrase that?
Okay, instead of cuckoo, you could describe her argument as showing maybe conceptual misalignment, or point out the willful ignorance of context when she defends Cooper but completely, as the material says, glosses over the fact that Fuentes calls himself a Nazi.
Ah, I see. So you're criticizing the action, the thinking, not just labeling the person.
Exactly. Or take a general label like dingbat. Replace it with something precise about the error. Is it rhetorical sleight of hand? Is it a failure to maintain logical consistency?
Especially when talking about that argument that simply criticizing Cooper is canceling.
Yes. Using a term like rhetorical sleight of hand there shows you understand the tactic. It forces engagement with the substance, not the emotion. It boosts your credibility as an analyst.
Okay, that focus on logical consistency, that's a perfect segue to our third point, which is all about logical priority. It ties structure and clarity together nicely.
It really does.
The structure seems to accidentally give way too much airtime to the secondary drama like Ted Cruz's supposed hypocrisy, instead of anchoring everything in the main undisputed fact.
Yeah, this is a key strategic misstep, I think. It almost feels like the material falls into Brett Cooper's trap, validating her framing.
How so?
Well, Cooper's whole angle starts with, Ted Cruz is a hypocrite for using the Nazi label, right?
Right.
And the material spends quite a bit of time going through Cruz's tweets, past and present. By doing that, it kind of lets Cooper's premise that Cruz's consistency is the main fight dictate the flow. It takes up too much structural weight.
When the real story, the undeniable starting point, should be Fuentes himself.
Exactly. The absolute core of it is that Nick Fuentes openly says he's a Nazi, Team Hitler, Führer Friday. That's the ground truth.
That has to come first.
It has to. If you get bogged down in debating Cruz's hypocrisy before you firmly establish the Fuentes situation, you're letting a distraction define the argument. You're missing the primary ethical point.
It's like arguing about how quickly the fire department arrived before confirming the house was actually on fire.
Perfect analogy. The logic needs to flow like this. First, establish the truth about Fuentes. Then, after that's crystal clear, you can discuss reactions, hypocrisy, whatever. Because once Fuentes' self-identification is established, Cooper's defense looks shaky regardless of Ted Cruz's tweet history.
So how do we fix that structurally? How does the writer make sure they front-load that crucial fact?
Just that. Front-load it. Start with the direct evidence of Fuentes identifying himself that way. Make it the very first major beat.
The sound bites, the quotes, the screenshots.
All of it. Make that connection. Action A leads to label B, absolutely solid and undeniable right at the beginning. That becomes the anchor for everything else.
And this is where that insight from the story box comes in handy, isn't it?
Absolutely essential. That should be the framing device for the entire argument, really.
Remind us of that specific phrasing.
It's the idea that there is a massive distinction between calling someone that is not a Nazi versus calling someone that calls himself a Nazi an actual Nazi.
Okay.
Use that distinction, use it up front to dismantle Cooper's initial premise before you even get to the Ted Cruz stuff.
So reframe the whole debate from the start.
Exactly. Show that Cooper's defense relies on a false equivalence. Make the factual claim about Fuentes the rock-solid foundation, then the analysis of political hypocrisy becomes a secondary layer, supporting the main point, not overshadowing it.
Okay, wow. This has been really helpful, I think. Some clear paths for improvement. Let's quickly recap the actionable advice.
Sounds good.
First, really zero in on structural integrity and thematic focus. You've got to either cleanly separate the political and the spiritual arguments or build that explicit conceptual bridge to link them tightly. Avoid that jarring thematic jump.
Second, work on the tone and style. Dial back the hyperbolic insults like dingbat and cuckoo. Instead, use precise, critical language focused on the actual behavior and the logical flaws. That strengthens credibility immensely.
And third, adjust the completeness and logical prioritization. Make absolutely sure the core evidence, Fuentes calling himself a Nazi, is established first and foremost. Anchor the entire critique there before getting into secondary issues like Ted Cruz's hypocrisy. Refute Cooper's premise up front.
Yup. Nailing those three things, structure, tone, and logical priority, will take this from being, a passionate but maybe scattered piece into something really high impact. A robust, intellectually solid critique that hits hard because of its substance.
Excellent points. We definitely encourage the listener to take these strategic ideas, refine this already powerful material, and please feel free to send it back our way for another look when you're ready.